prepare to race onto the field. Everything is riding on this football game. So there's a special intensity, a special urgency. Here come the Volunteers. Wherever you listen throughout the world, it's football time in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Talkin Vols Network. My name is Boogie Bentley.
I'm Dauber.
And I'm the Indie Kid.
And this is the fall of the Vols, taking you into the Jeremy Pruitt era. This one should be fun, should be a lot of jokes, should be a lot of sore memories as well. But this is going to wrap it up for the negativity when it comes to the fall of the Vols series. We are going to be going live Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, for the rise of the Vols as we talk about the transition into the Josh Heupel era. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit of positivity. It's going to be what Josh Heupel has to do to get this thing turned around. So I hope you guys will tune in that night, and then it's go time. We are going to be rocking and rolling every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern until kickoff. And then obviously once the games get going, we will go live immediately following every game. But we're going to dive into it. Before we get started, drop down below the video, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Click that bell for notifications. You won't miss out when we go live and when we drop new content. But we got a lot to discuss today. I guess a couple of listeners asked us, made a request. They actually asked for an extra video to talk about the debacle that was the coaching search after the firing of Butch Jones. So, Indy Kid, let's kick it off. Let's start with the coaching search, and then we'll go through the Jeremy Pruitt era.
Coaching search took twists and turns. The big name, of course, throughout the whole coaching search was the groomers were wild and rampant, going from Gruden had a Dollywood season pass to meeting boosters at Grove Park in Asheville. I mean, Gruden kind of fueled them sitting in the crowd at
I think he thrived on it. He thrived on it. You know he did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he loved it. He loved the attention. Gruden wasn't going to happen. I really think Dan Mullen had a real shot at being the coach, but then the Florida job came open. Had Florida not came open, I think Dan Mullen may have been Tennessee's head coach that year. I think that's a real possibility. Once Florida came open, he took Florida. Then Tennessee, that's when John Curry's still the AD. Greg Schiano, we know how that went, the Schiano revolt. And fair or not, I don't necessarily think it was really fair. I didn't really want the guy either, but hindsight's 2020, he would have been much better than what we ended up with. So Tennessee shifted gears, kind of looked like, let's say at one point, Jeff Brom looked like a real candidate. Purdue, Dave Doran, NC State. There's documents come out that he basically, his agent verbally said he's in. And then John Curry just kind of ghosted him. Don't know what happened there. And then it looked like Mike Leach was going to be the head coach. And that's when, what was it? Old Bev Davenport was the chancellor. Yeah. Supposedly could not get a hold of John Curry. I don't know if John Curry had gone rogue or what happened, but she had him come back to Knoxville, and where John Curry was relieved of his duties. And just so happened that the snake in the grass himself, Phil Fulmer, was waiting, pulling strings and ready to take over and save Tennessee. And, yeah, he saved Tennessee all right.
But What's crazy is everything you just unloaded right there, the history of that coaching search. When it was time, when Fulmer took over, we were all excited. I know, Indy Kid, you weren't a part of the channel at the time, but we were on board. It was like we need somebody that feels like home to come in and save this thing. And then he goes out and gets, at the time, what we thought was a ball coach. And Jeremy Pruitt comes in, he says and does the right things right out of the gate. And I know, Indy Kid, you said you hated him from Jump Street, but I felt like he was the complete opposite of Butch Jones, right? We had heard for so many years the cliches, the 63 effort, the champions of life, all that stuff. Whereas Jeremy Pruitt comes in and he was in your face. We're going to play physical football. He talked about the SEC. He said the right things, but unfortunately he wasn't a ball coach and it didn't work out. But let's go back and unpack Schiano Saturday, because like you said, Indy Kid, I have a timeline here basically saying Saturday morning, Tennessee was after Dan Mullen. But then that evening, Scott Frost tells Florida he's not interested. All of a sudden, Mullen's no longer Tennessee's target. Now he's Florida's target. And then Sunday afternoon, it says USA Today Sports reports that Tennessee working to finalize the deal with Schiano. Once that leaks to the press, they're flying back to Knoxville for the press conference that night when it leaks, and all hell breaks loose. Dauber, where do you think this fan base was on that, right or wrong? Because at the end of the day, we talk about the Aaron Beasley situation. At the end of the day, Schiano testified. He denied seeing anything going on with Sandusky and up there at Penn State. He was found innocent.
Right, and that's November 26th, 2017. That's what we're talking about here. Schiano Sunday. Man, I remember getting a text about mid-afternoon on Sunday, and guys, a couple buddies had sent me some Twitter links. Said, man, it looks like it's Greg Schiano. And my first thought, all Penn State stuff aside, all of that aside, I thought, man, I don't know if that's a good fit. Just because of his track record, everything that I had seen about him from his time at Tampa Bay in the NFL, he wasn't a player's coach. And he's also a Northerner. And not to, cast aspersions or isolate the entire Northern population.
Piss off our 3 Northern listeners.
Right. I didn't think it was a good fit. I didn't think it would work out. But like Indy Kid said, hindsight's 20/20, and I think what we fell to after that didn't work out was a guy that was in over his head. A position coach taking his first head coaching job that wasn't ready for it. But going back to Schiano, I just think that there was a lot of baggage from Penn State that some people couldn't deal with. And all that aside, I think Greg Schiano, ultimately, I don't think he would have had success here just because of the things that I talked about. I don't think the fit was right. But, man, Curry is the one that the twists and the turns, and we've talked before a little bit about it, and Indy Kid didn't lead into this. He was in at the Battle for Atlantis with the basketball team while this coaching search was unfolding, and reports going wild left and right. It's this guy, it's that guy, and he already had his guy. He already had Schiano, and that's the name that he was going with. I think there was conflicts with certain boosters and all of that, and then with the administration, and that's a key piece that throughout this fall from '98 until this hire right now, with Fulmer being let go or retiring, the athletic department and the university administration, they've not been on the same page for decades. And that has been a key contributing factor to this fall, to the lack of successful coaching searches, the lack of due diligence put forward in those coaching searches, and the lack of hiring candidates that are qualified. I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about Derek Dooley. He was hired with a losing record. I mean, answer me that. Why? Why are you going to hire somebody that is unsuccessful to coach at that time one of the winningest college football programs in the country? It's just a complete cluster that the university and the administration and the athletic department did during this whole time, which led us to where we are right now.
It all goes back to whether or not the Kiffin hire was right. It's irrelevant, I guess. But then 1 year leaves in the middle of the night, the Derek Dooley hire. Ever since then, every coaching search, we almost got what we deserved after that Derek Dooley hire. Any kid, I know you hate Jeremy Pruitt. You hated him from day one. You never got on board. What's the story, Morning Glory? Let it loose.
Hate's a strong word. Didn't like him. Let's just say I didn't like him. But, I mean, at first, I was kind of just indifferent. I was in not so much didn't like him from the beginning, but I was prove it to me.
Right.
And that was kind of my stance with him from the get-go. Gave him a chance. But then once he's a prick, number one, and no personality. That's fine. You don't have to be the nicest guy in the world to be a head football coach. As long as you're winning. But then, I didn't really have a problem so much. But then we got into the season. From game one, play one, he was in over his head. And the first play, Jarrett Garantano got killed. Don't know what the play was or what have you against West Virginia. He got killed, and they were just always a poorly coached team. They bounced back the second week and won. Had the Florida come to town. Was really excited about that. Florida blew them out. They looked like they had never been coached in their lives, and I just thought that was the case throughout his tenure. He got fool's gold a couple times in his first year, beating Auburn at Auburn and beating Kentucky. But beyond that, nothing. It just, you knew how much it used to aggravate me to death. Couple minutes to go in the half. What would he do? He'd run the clock out. Pissed me off to no end.
What's so weird to the opposite side of that, though, is there were a lot of times he showed balls, like going for it on fourth down from his own.
The onside kicks.
Own 30, onside kicks. I never quite understood that, why he showed guts at certain times and then other times just seemed absolutely scared to go try to win a football game. And that's looking through that 2018. What's interesting is when we went back through the Butch Jones era and talked about just how close he was. When you look at the times that he beat Georgia, that he beat Florida, obviously didn't have success against Alabama, but he was in a lot of games and he won some games against Georgia and Florida. But when you start to look, when Jeremy Pruitt took over in 2018, all of a sudden Tennessee is no longer in those games. They're no longer in it's like you said, Florida comes to town and Tennessee just absolutely gets blown out. Following week, go on the road to Georgia, get blown out. Alabama always blew out Jeremy Pruitt. But, that first season just absolutely terrible. And I think for the most part, we all went into it with that same mindset of prove it to me. Where Jeremy Pruitt really started to, I guess, not win me over, but I guess trick me, fool me, get me to buy in was the winning streak towards the end of his second season. But
one thing too, in his first year, and this become a trend, brought in Keller Chris from Stanford, much better, much more qualified quarterback than what was there. And who did he play the whole time? Except for against Alabama, Garantano got knocked out of the game. Chris come in, looked good. They scored 21 points against Bama, which was, Bama still had the top-notch defenses at that point. But yet, then right back to Garantano the next week. That was just a sign of things to come over the next 3 years. And why, after you brought Chris in, you wouldn't play him. They never went back to the transfer. Of course, the portals wasn't there the entire time, but quarterback transfers were happening at a pretty high rate. And at no point did he bring another transfer in to push Garantano. Horrible decision, and it cost them a lot of games.
Why do you guys
would have made that move?
Why do you guys think it was that what was it with Jarrett Garantano? I will say this, that I did defend his decision to start Garantano in 2020, but the majority of that was because, look at Harrison Bailey. Yes, big-time prospect coming out of high school. Everybody calling him the next Peyton Manning before he ever steps foot on campus. But as a true freshman, and you don't go through spring ball, and then you miss the first 2 weeks of fall camp, so you basically had 2 weeks to try to get a true freshman ready. I defended Jeremy Pruitt on that. Once we got into the season, all bets were off the wheels fell off in 2020, and it was time to give Harrison Bailey a chance. Why is it, Dauber? What is that connection? Because the failure of Jeremy Pruitt, I think, will always be linked to Jarrett Garantano.
Well, and I don't know that you can solely tie it to him. I think that a lot of it falls on Chris Winkie. A lot of it falls on Harrison Bailey, on Brian Maurer, on the other guys in that quarterback room that weren't pushing number 2 to be better or to take his job. Because you saw nobody step up and be the man and take that role. So, I mean, in that position, what are you going to do? I think, like you said, going into the season, I think I was the same boat you are. I didn't care who it was, but based off of experience, I think you go with Garantano because he had the most experience. He'd been in the pressure cooker situations of the SEC games, going on the road. You know, you're talking about a senior quarterback with, you know, upside that we had seen, but, you know, also had made those mistakes and blunders and then some guys that, you know, in Maurer that was had a couple starts, came in with some energy and electricity, but could never finish a game because he kept recklessly getting hurt. And then you had Shrout come in with a big arm, but wasn't really there in a complete capacity at quarterback. Tons of upside, and I hate that those guys, and Harrison Bailey for that matter, you know, you said missing fall camp, missing spring, and all that. Okay, well, get him in week 1 and week 2. Get him some reps. Let's see what the kid can do. Have people pushing to take that spot over. If things aren't working out, you've got to change it. Otherwise, it's insanity. That's the definition of insanity, is repeating something over and over and hoping for something different. And
I think the bigger issue, I'm with you guys. I think going into 2020, you had to go with him. Where I was kind of puzzled was going into year 2. There was absolutely no reason he shouldn't have brought a transfer in to push.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you had Maurer coming in as a true freshman. You had Shrout as a redshirt freshman. There was absolutely no reason there should not have been someone else brought in to push him. That was a horrible decision. And first 2 games, you saw it.
Yeah. And the offense came out lethargic. You know, couldn't move the ball up and down the field. And that was kind of a key factor for the Pruitt coach teams, struggling to not just score points, to move the ball down the field and get first downs. Had to grind out 10 yards at a time.
Looking back to that 2019 again, those first 2 games, that's why, even though they put together the winning streak, that Georgia State game, and then to turn around and lose to BYU the way they lost to them, you know, after that Georgia State game, myself and JP went live, and he said Jeremy Pruitt will never get it done at Tennessee. And that's why throughout the winning streak that he had towards the end of 2019 going into 2020, you always had to say, yes, they've won X number of games, but
look at the full body of work.
You cannot forget those games at the start of 2019. You cannot forget that.
It falls back to not being prepared. And that goes all the way up to the top. A coach that was not prepared and a coach that did not prepare the team.
I got to talk about it because I talked about it the entire time Jim Chaney was back in Knoxville. And then we have the reports coming out here just within the last few weeks talking about, you know, Jeremy Pruitt calling up to the box, forcing Jim Chaney, telling him what to run. Jim Chaney says they've not practiced this in this situation. This is a bad idea. So when we talk about the offense and the lack of success, one of the first things I ever questioned was, why is Jim Chaney not working hands-on with the quarterbacks? Why? Is it because he's lazy? Is it because he doesn't want to? So that never made sense to me. But then also on top of that, we never saw Jim Chaney's offense back in Knoxville this second time around. We never saw it. We never saw it. That was Jeremy Pruitt's offense, and that's why it did not succeed.
I think I think Jeremy Pruitt, being under Nick Saban, he tried to emulate a lot of things that Saban did, which is fine if you're Nick Saban and you're winning, and you have the talent in the stables that a team like Alabama has. But when you come in and you don't have guys that are pushing each other to be better, especially at the quarterback position in the SEC, and you have a coach that wants to micromanage, and we called it from early on this. We said there is something, and I believe it was JP that said something's not right down there, and it just things never really added up. And I mean, you could look back and pick out certain things from the 3 seasons he was there and say, man, that's a red flag. Why didn't we notice this at that time? And it's like you said, the was it 8-game streak that carried over, counting the bowl, that covered up and kind of took the sour taste out of your mouth as a fan. And you thought, okay, maybe we're heading in the right direction. But it really was just kind of a stumble upon some teams at good times and, made the best of some games, had some players playing out of their minds. And I don't think it was due to coaching. I think it was their pure athletic ability that caused those games to swing in our favor.
I think one thing in that second year when that streak happened, you had some coaches who I thought really coached your hind ends off, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You started seeing, how long did we wait on Nigel Warrior?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, that last year Nigel Warrior was there. It was like you had the Florida game, which was a disaster, which was the case every year of the Pruitt era. But then after that, something clicked. Nigel Warrior was probably about as good as any safety in the country.
Yeah.
The rest of the way. You saw defensive line improvement. You saw linebacker improvement. Those guys on the defensive side of the ball were really coaching their tails off. But then at the end of the year, they didn't renew Tracy Rocker. They didn't renew Chris Rump. Big losses.
Agreed. I think Rocker was a huge loss. If you look at the linebacker play between, 19 and 20, big downturn.
Well, the line, that's what that was his thing. The line played, they were very good, but I think you had, you mentioned about the players. You had leaders, Jennings, Callaway, Warrior, Darrell Taylor, Batuli. Daniel Batuli was so underrated in Tennessee. Heck of a linebacker. All those guys, and some of them it clicked later than others, but those guys were leaders. And I think that was a big reason. And again, you caught teams at the right time. You won the games you should win late, but that wasn't always the case with Pruitt. But then, again, I don't know, some of it was fool's gold. I don't know what it was, but then Philip Fulmer gives him a freaking contract extension, or raising an extension after that.
What's interesting to look at is you talking about coaches, because I think, Indy Kid, you've talked about it a lot on this channel. That year when they transitioned, you had coaches that developed talent. You had coaches that were teachers. And that's what I like about this Josh Heupel coaching staff. Yes, there's some unknowns. Obviously, Tim Banks is the defensive coordinator. How's that going to play out? But I feel like they have teachers from top to bottom. So when you talk about those guys that they didn't renew, Rump, Rocker, who did they replace them with? Shelton Felton, outside linebackers coach. Brian Niedermeyer, inside linebackers coach. Just guys brought in for the sake of recruiting, but no player development. Jimmy Brumbaugh, defensive line coach that gets fired in the fourth week of the season.
4 games, yeah. That's what I was going to say. Just the turmoil within that staff and the things that were going on in the coaches' offices that it just seems like that kind of storm that was brewing and everything that was going on there just made it all the way to the locker room. And I think that there was really a division of players. And I think we saw reports during the season. There were certain guys that wanted certain people to play quarterback. And, there was sort of a divided locker room at that factor of the team. And it really was, I think, just a case of Jeremy Pruitt kind of, I don't know that he ever had the locker room to lose.
Listen to the interviews now. Like, again, Josh Heupel, something he does well. He lets all of his guys out in front of the microphone, all of them. Look how many players have been out to the media just since fall camp started. So many players that we've had access to, and they all say the same thing. They say it without going too in depth. But Jeremy Pruitt was a dictator. Nobody was having fun. It was always negative. But going back to the very beginning, Indy Kid, you can be a dick when you're winning, not when you're losing, not when you're going 3-7.
That's it. And again, I don't care what your personality is. That's fine. But you can't act like that and lose. And again, you made the comment he's trying to emulate Saban. He's not Saban, and people knew that. And this is going to be kind of cruel toward the guy, not Pruitt, but toward Garantano. Not his fault he's getting put out there. Obviously, they ask him to go play. He's going to go play. He does his job. I have no doubt he worked hard. I have no doubt he did everything he did. But how frustrating it is as a player if you keep seeing the same guy year after year after year go out and make the same mistakes. And again, he's trying. It's not for effort. I'm not slamming him. It's just revisionist history. It is what it is. How frustrating is that if I'm out there and I keep seeing it over and over and it's like, what? Yeah, it's got to cause that division where you're eventually going to say, I need to see somebody else. Come on, give somebody else a chance down here. And again, I don't mean that to slide him or anything. It happened. I'm going off of what happened. I'm not making it up, obviously. So that's got to be tough.
But I mean, that simple fact opens up the question: what could Garantano or any of the other quarterbacks done had they actually let Chaney open up the playbook and allow him to coach instead of being micromanaged by Pruitt? I mean, it's one of those things. You can look back and dissect it and turn it every which way, and man, it's like looking back to the '98 season. The ball bounces a couple different ways. Instead of being 13-0, we're 11-2. It's just one of those things. It's easy to look back, and hindsight's 20/20, but there were definitely red flags all along in Jeremy Pruitt's tenure at the University of Tennessee.
What I think big thing you mentioned, and was Florida, Alabama, Georgia. That's kind of your measuring sticks. And it would have been a big chore to beat them. They were never competitive in any of those games. Never competitive. And that's the thing, that Georgia game this past year, they were competitive the first half, led. Whatever happened at halftime, it was never the same.
Yep.
That's when the wheels fell off. One what I was going to say was going back to just continuing the quarterback conversation was the Alabama game where Tennessee was competitive. Of course, the final score they weren't, but they had an opportunity. They took – we live streamed that game on air, watching it live, and Tennessee had a chance. And Jarrett Garantano goes rogue. After that game, you say as a fan, there is no way possible. That was Jarrett Garantano's last play at the University of Tennessee. But what happens? He sends him right back out there. I think it was the very next
He didn't
week.
start him. He didn't start him, but he kind of, I think maybe Jennings, because Jennings technically started at quarterback one. He just did it to take some heat off of Garantano, but same way.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
You're right. They were competitive in that game. And And I would even venture to say they got a little shady officiating against them that game too. There was some. I remember watching it, and I was hot over the officiating over some calls. But yeah, they had brought Crouch in. You knew who it was going to, and the replay showed that he could have still been running. Hole was wide open on it, and Garantano went rogue, and it went the other way. That was when I said, "This guy." I'm like you. That's the last we've seen of him down there. Nope, we saw him for another year and a half. That should have been it.
I feel like almost something's off with Harrison Bailey. Let's just something's off. Something is off. And I've obviously made the videos and talked about it till I'm blue in the face, and I get yelled at and told that he's the greatest thing ever. How much damage did Jeremy Pruitt do to Harrison Bailey? Because I feel like every quarterback on that roster, not just quarterback players across the board, but just for the sake of this conversation, quarterbacks were scared to death to make a mistake. Jarrett Garantano, and again, I feel like we're burying the kid. It's not that. I support him as much as anybody. But that kid seemed like he could go out there and make all the mistakes in the world and got another opportunity and another opportunity and another opportunity. Trout goes in, Harrison Bailey goes in, one small mistake, they're jerked and thrown right on the bench, and Garantano's right back on that field. How much mental damage did that do to those quarterbacks? And how much is that impacting now with this new staff? What they love it when I say it. Why go get Joe Milton when at the time you got 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster? Something's missing in that quarterback room. I don't want to get ahead. I'm getting way ahead, but how much damage did Jeremy Pruitt do to those quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. And we'll go. I'll bring it up one more time. You look at Jim Chaney. You look at his body of work developing quarterbacks. You look at what he did at Pitt with Nathan Peterman. You look at what he did at Tennessee the first go around, and the success that offensive unit had.
Did he just all of a sudden forget how to coach football? I don't think so.
I don't think he was allowed to.
Exactly.
I wonder if he regrets that decision. He was at Georgia. Now, maybe Georgia wanted him out too. I don't know. But, yeah, that was seen as a real nice hire. People were excited about it. But it just seemed that, guys, the offenses were so slow developing. There was no cohesion. There was no flow. And I would even say Jarrett Garantano, it looked like he was scared to make a mistake at times. Yeah. There was just, indecision amongst them. And I think it's a valid point. Maurer, Shrout, and Harrison Bailey, all three, they made a mistake. They're out. But we'll see. I'm with you. There's a reason Joe Milton was brought in. And, I mean, Jeremy Pruitt, when he thought he's coming back, brought in Hendon Hooker. So.
Well, and I'll throw this out there too. This past season, look at the offensive line play and look at the regression that was there, the talent that was there, and we still couldn't move the ball up the field, couldn't at times couldn't run block, and then when we could run block, we couldn't pass block. I mean, it was absurd. The lack of development and coaching looking back, and how you had players that have had so much talent and potential that just regressed or were misused or didn't get any better. And that's a red flag if I don't know. If you're not getting the most out of the guys that you're putting on the field and you're not seeing improvement, then you're failing as a coach.
Will Friend and Chris Winkie both didn't deserve a penny from their time in Knoxville. They were both useless. Their units did nothing.
So let's transition this thing. We're about 35 minutes in. We try to keep these things around 45 minutes as possible. But if you're going to talk about the Jeremy Pruitt era, you're going to talk about the way he went out. NCAA investigation, obviously creating so much chaos for the incoming staff. And that's why as you get into that next coaching search, it is what it is. And you can talk about poor recruiting for Josh Heupel. What's he supposed to do? These were the cards that he was dealt. But Jeremy Pruitt fired. If Jeremy Pruitt was winning, Indy Kid, would any of this have come out?
Nope.
Not a word.
Not a chance of it. Not a chance of it. If he's sitting at 6 or 7 wins last year, you'd have never heard a word about it.
Agreed.
They leaked that to try to get out of the buyout. And that's my belief on it. It was a mistake. They should have never leaked it. They should have just fired him and paid the buyout instead of causing all this, because they did more harm than good. And who knows what the NCAA, what they're going to do.
Yeah, we still are in a state of limbo. We really don't know, and that's why you have Heupel signing a contract that is saying that if there are bowl bans and all this, that he gets another year, and it does hurt in recruiting. It does hurt in his ability to potentially bring in staff when you're talking about coming into an unknown situation. But I mean, at the end of the day, I do think that this team and this staff, that they are trending up, because frankly, there's no other way to go. We are sitting in a rough spot. We've fallen from the top of the hill, and it's been a long, slow, painful fall.
I wonder what happens if you do like Indy Kid said, you fire Jeremy Pruitt, you give him his buyout, you send him packing, your coaching search is going to go different. But what happens to Phil Fulmer? I think the hiring of Danny White is huge for moving forward with the athletic department. I think he gets it. I think he's a new brand, and I love it. It's a breath of fresh air. Tennessee athletics feel different since Danny White has shown up. So what happens if you just fire Jeremy Pruitt, you pay him his buyout, you move forward? Do you think Phil Fulmer goes ahead and steps down? Do you think Tennessee brings Danny White in?
Here's the thing. I don't think Fulmer could have fired Pruitt, because Fulmer is the one that brought him in.
He was tied. He was attached
Fulmer,
to the hip.
He wasn't firing him. Yeah.
Fulmer is the one that gave him a raise and extension, like Indy Kid brought up.
So it was all behind the scenes, scheming and scamming, Game of Thrones, cutthroat politics to get Fulmer and Pruitt both out. So if you don't leak this, Jeremy Pruitt, Philip Fulmer coming back for 2021.
You've also got to look at the events that happened after Pruitt was let go. Bringing in Steele.
Man.
Bringing in all of these pieces and parts and this moving and orchestrating. I mean, what purpose was all of that?
Phil Fulmer thought that he wasn't going to get the axe. He thought he was going to slide through clean, and that's why he was setting up the pieces. And, I think we might have touched on this. I don't know. We've done so many live streams and episodes and videos. Phil Fulmer was setting up Steele to be his head coach and T. Martin to be his offensive coordinator. That's why T. Martin was offered an extension after all that crap went down. And they paid him. I don't know if that went public, but I think Swain talked about it on the Swain event. They gave T. Martin his money, even though they didn't, contractual, whatever, they didn't have to.
Yeah, they paid a lot of money that, in addition to buyouts, you had to pay T. Martin. You had to pay Kevin Steele for, a couple of weeks of work or a month or so.
And you're still paying Philip Fulmer.
Yeah. I mean, that's, Philip Fulmer's retirement. Yeah, it was not a retirement. He was forced out. And the writing was on the wall. I think everyone should have known at that point when that leaked prior to that Texas A&M game and the way the season had gone. That doesn't leak if you're not making a change. And I don't know why the fan base was so attached to Jeremy Pruitt, because I know in your guys' shows talked about he's done. It's time to make a change. I did the day after videos. I don't know how many times, basically, I was told I didn't know what I was talking about. I was an idiot for saying Jeremy Pruitt's going. Jeremy Pruitt was a horrible football coach, and people loved him. They thought he was so many people. It's like, you can't change. I mean, I don't know if it was the fear of another change or what it was. You could not proceed. They cut ties when they needed to cut ties. It was time. If you had brought Jeremy Pruitt and Philip Fulmer back for 2021, apathy would have been at an all-time high.
Oh, this show would have been awful.
I honestly said that I was done. If Jeremy Pruitt and Fulmer come back, I was done with. I wasn't watching until he was gone.
So as we look back over all of this, the Jeremy Pruitt era, the debacle of a coaching search, John Curry getting pulled off the road and fired, the not even ups and downs. He had one little winning streak. And when you go back and look at that winning streak, it was teams he should have beat. And the real thing that stands out, as Dauber touched on a little bit earlier, a lot of those games were really close. The ball bounces another way. That winning streak is not a thing. That bowl game against Indiana, that was when we did the meet and greet, me and Dauber. It's amazing that anybody was left in that bar at the end when the game ended. So many games they could have lost throughout that winning streak. But we look back through all of it, and now we kind of roll into the Josh Heupel era. All this took place to get us to where we are now with Danny White, with Josh Heupel. We talked about, the leadership being in alignment. Whether it was right or wrong, I think things are trending up, like Dauber said. There is a different mindset in Knoxville right now, and I'm excited. I think you guys are excited about Josh Heupel. He may or may not work out. Time will tell. But we are going to do the live show on Thursday, again, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I hope you guys will join us. We will continue to talk about that. But was it worth it, Dauber, when it's all said and done? Was it worth it? Or has Tennessee set themselves too far back with this NCAA investigation?
That's a loaded question, and really that's still unknown because we don't know the depths of what the team faces. Here's the thing for me, it just feels different this time around. And you and I, we did a live stream the after Danny White was hired, when he had his opening presser, and we went back and watched that and talked about it and discussed things. And like you said, and like Danny White said, he wants to build a brand. And I think that we've been so tied to living in the past and tied to living off of tradition and the success of the past that we've not built for the future. And I'm not talking about, the stadiums or the infrastructure. I'm talking about the brand, the University of Tennessee. And I talked about it at the beginning of the show, the lack of cohesion and the lack of working together between the athletic department, the administration, the coaching staffs. There's been so much conflict and strife during this 20-plus year run that it just feels different. Now that you seemingly do have an athletic department, an athletic director in Danny White, who is working hand in hand with the university administration, bringing in a coaching staff who the very first time they meet with leaders on the team, they feel that what this team needs is leadership. What this team needs is guidance and coaching. And that's all we're seeing out of the spring and the fall camps. And they got raked over some of the stuff that they were doing, some of the team building stuff that they were doing. People are like, why are they doing that? They need to be focusing on football. Well, when they met with Josh Heupel, that's what they said they needed. So I don't know how you can be against a guy who, one, hasn't coached a game yet, and two, all he's doing is listening to what his players have indicated. Hey, this is what we need. We need guidance. We need somebody to bring us together and have people step up and be leaders on the field. And I'm excited. I think we all have entered each of these phases with optimism and hope because we want the guy who's coming in to be a success. Whether
I said
it was
today on replying to a comment, somebody being negative or no, somebody was saying they enjoy that I'm optimistic. My mindset, and it's what you just said, I am optimistic until that person gives me a reason not to be optimistic anymore.
Indy Kid said it earlier with the hiring of Pruitt. It was prove it to me. And I think that's a fair assessment because he had not been a head coach before. So what do you have to build off of? What do you have to look back at? Nothing. So he has to prove it. We've seen Josh Heupel have success as a coordinator. We've seen him come in, and people want to say, oh, his teams at Central Florida, their records got worse every year. Well,
Lazy.
I mean, you can't – I mean, you can't base it off of one season or the other. You can't base Fulmer's success as a coach off of 98. You can't base his, tenure as a coach off of 2005 or 2008, those seasons that were down seasons for him. So it's not make or break because I think we are where we are in the bottom of the conference right now. But it will be interesting to see how this team builds and how this staff gets the players that are there if they are developing them. If we do see improvement week to week and we do see players getting better, because I think that is the biggest thing that we've not seen.
I feel that from the top down, from your president, your chancellor, your AD, I feel everybody's on the same page. I feel this is the strongest leadership from top to bottom that Tennessee has had since Dickey was there.
Yeah.
And Mike Hamilton was a facilities builder more than anything. He was a money raiser. He was basically a politician. Dave Hart was brought in to try to fix football. Dave Hart didn't care about other brands. I mean, he almost started a revolt over the Lady Vols brand, which was ridiculous. Philip Fulmer was a snake in the grass. He was there waiting. Of course, John Curry. How do I forget John Curry? And, I mean, of course, you got to give John Curry credit. He hired Tony Vitello. So that's a good hire, a great hire, as a matter of fact. Something was off with John Curry, though. And then, of course, Fulmer took over. Like you said, Boogie, I think we were all like, Fulmer, it's the right time. But when I looked at Danny White when he took over, when he was at Central Florida, he wasn't just focused on football or what. It was a well-rounded program. All sports were succeeding, thriving. That excites me because as a Tennessee fan, I'm not just a Tennessee football. I'm not one of these that I pull for Tennessee football during football season, and then I'm a North Carolina or a Duke fan come basketball season.
That's the big one.
And there's plenty of people. I want Tennessee to succeed in all sports. I'm a Tennessee guy on everything. And that excites me that we have leadership, and especially an AD who likes a well-rounded program. Because even though it was cool when football was good, there were some down years in basketball. Baseball, it was just kind of – I liked the whole year. I mean, look at how much excitement there was with baseball this year. Imagine if that's replicated year-round throughout the other sports. And I'm excited about it. Heupel, I think, is a breath of fresh air because, number one, when he was playing, he played at a high level, won a national championship with Oklahoma in, I think it was 2000. Tennessee was just 2 years removed from winning national champion. He knows Tennessee's brand. He knows Tennessee is a top-notch brand, and I think that's big. And, you mentioned about people were cracking on him over his team build stuff. One of the things he mentioned coming in, and you guys have touched upon it, building relationships. That's a big thing in coaching and education is relationship building right now. That is a big one. And that excites me just as an educator because I know what that means. And sometimes it's not initially about getting better in the weight room, getting better on the field. Sometimes you got to meet the guys where they're at, build that relationship, get to know them, because they will, if they like you and respect you, work harder for you. And I think that's where Tennessee has approached that. Now, there's some guys on that staff that's going to get in their grill. You've seen it with Rodney Garner, one of the best defensive line coaches in the country. But he said it. He said, it's my way or the highway, basically. You're going to have guys like, and you need that at times. But where they met these guys, I thought was pretty vital. And Danny White listened to them before he hired a coach. And he said that we've talked about, he's talked to, I think James Franklin was coach. We talked about Tony Elliott. Sometimes missing out on guys is not the end of the world because not everybody is prepared for a job like Tennessee. You got to understand the magnitude of it. It is a big job. There's a lot of scrutiny. You're going to get criticized over things. You've got to have tough skin, thick skin to come and do it. Josh Heupel, from everything we hear, is that guy.
Well, and that's something we've talked about with Butch Jones, looking back. I think he was very insecure, and within that pressure cooker of the SEC and, big time football, that he kind of crumbled, and, he did some weird stuff as a head coach. And, just the comments and you guys got into it.
Just real quick, that was something I thought was Shiano.
Yeah.
I thought he was the same. I didn't think for that same reason. I thought he would have been like Butch Jones, not being able to handle criticism.
Agreed.
He showed that in places before.
Yeah.
Well, there's your teaser for what's going to be coming your way on Thursday. Again, live at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be talking about the coaching search that led to Josh Heupel and then just what he has to do to get Tennessee back in the right direction. So you guys will be there with us. You guys will be able to voice your opinions in the chat. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. If you haven't done so yet, smash that thumbs up on the way out the door. Pick up the official merchandise of the Talkin' Vols Network. That link's in the description below as well. He's Jobber. He's the Indie Kid. I'm Boogie Bentley. This is the Talkin' Vols Network. Go Big Orange.